All right, guys, so we're going to talk about despilling and how to think about it and how to simplify this process in our mind a little bit in terms of how we're going to solve despilling problems. So if we go back down to our comp, so we're in part 3, despilling, but a large part of this comp is actually copied from the key mixing script. So we have pretty much the key that we already built, or I kind of explained how to build. And I'm going to show you guys how to go about despilling this specific key, or at least aspects of it, before we go into, this is almost the compositing structure that we're going to go over after, and then we'll do a practical follow along where you guys build the script yourself. But I think it's just easier to explain the concepts before we actually build it out. So we have like an alpha built here. And so what we need to do is actually despill this. So if we look at without despill, like kind of what we already built with no despilling applied. We have a green screen, we have an alpha, and we've copied that into this picture. And then when we pre-multiply it, we get the green edges that I was talking about earlier. So if we merge this over a background, obviously that doesn't feel integrated, so that's not going to work for our final composite. So we need to figure out how to get rid of the green, but we can't just get rid of the green. So actually there's two things we need to think about when we're doing these color corrections to get rid of the green. And those two things, the primary things, is the brightness of the background and the color of the thing that you are despilling. Okay, so when we go through these tools, I'm going to go through these individually in the next videos, these 3 color correction tools. But one thing is, if we just despill it, so this is called Despill Madness. This is in the script for you guys to save. So if you click this thing here and you click this little wrench over here and say create, you can create and save this. And this is just something that someone in Nukipedia made that has a bunch of despilling equations basically in there. And you don't need to remember the equations. You just need to know that this is a really good tool for automatically removing green from a green screen. But like I said, there's things we need to consider. If we just despill this image with a pure one color despill, we essentially have just gray, which is okay, but you'll see where this problem comes in. So again, the things we need to consider: the brightness and the color of the background behind the area that you're despilling. So that might sound weird, but if I copy this and I put it on there, so let's just put the default Despill Madness on there. I'll close all these. So we have our color image that gets despilled. We copy our alpha in. That's this whole thing is just the alpha being copied in. So now we have a combined sort of thing here. So we have the despill and the alpha, and when we pre-multiply it, we've gotten rid of that green because we've done the color correction, and we can merge that over a background. And you'll see some of the areas work okay, but like I said, you need to consider your background brightness when you're despilling. So this area in particular, you can see this is a very big problem because we have gotten rid of the green, but we haven't darken this area relative to the background that it's going to be placed on. So now you understand that, okay, it's kind of like keying, where one key doesn't solve the entire frame of your shot. You essentially need to treat it similar to key mixing, except you're despill mixing. So essentially you would apply one despill here that works, another despill here that works, and you would go around your frame and despill differently different areas. And that's normally how despilling works. Despilling is actually, sometimes it takes longer than the key itself. Of course, there's ways to speed this up, which we'll teach and go over, but that's just to explain the concept. So brightness and color of the background you're compositing on. So for example, this hair looks kind of weird here, but if you watch this example, if I take the background and I move it and I put this brighter beams over, you see now that gray area, it's still a little bit gray. We'd still need to tweak it a little bit, but you see it's much less noticeable. So because it's on a brighter background, we would despill this differently than if these rays, this background, was over here. So your background will change the way you approach a shot. No matter what background you have, you need to consider, usually I will put the background in and then begin my despilling process rather than just trying to color correct a bunch of stuff and then putting a background. And it turns out that your despill doesn't work over certain areas because there's a luminance difference. So there's two ways you can fix this. You can either go to the problem area and you can despill. You can either take the color that's on the foreground, so like let's say the brown of this guy's hair, and we would try to color correct this area, this gray area, in the same color as his hair. So that's one way to approach it. The other way to approach it is to take the background color. You could take this color and essentially pull it in and kind of contaminate that background color into that edge. So you either, let me just take a roto paint because it would be easier to explain. So put a roto paint here and just switch to a different color. So when you're despilling, you're either taking this color and despilling this color to here. So we would try to grade this color brown. Or you're taking the background color, whatever's back here, and trying to color correct whatever this color is in the background. For example, if we look at the actual background, it's kind of a tan. And trying to put that here. So whatever. So let's say you have like a red sky that's like here. That's going to be here in the background. This is going to become a red sky. Then you would just take that same red color and kind of color correct this area a little bit red. And then we would pre-multiply it and merge it over. So for example, if I just do that really fast, I'll just show you. We could do, so this is, there's a trick called creating a despill matte. So essentially what you can do is you despill your image using a tool like this, Despill Madness, and you can take a merge node and subtract it from the original image behind. So we have this green image and we have this gray image. So if I subtract the two and you say merge, you say minus. Essentially you get the difference between the two. So essentially all the areas that were green that turned gray, you're getting kind of an alpha that you can use. So if we look at the red, green, and blue channels, if we look at the red channel, we get a pretty much black and white alpha that we could actually use to color correct. So just to show you and go on with our example, I'm going to take this image, and right now it's in a weird channel. That's why we're getting a purple color. So it doesn't really matter in this example which way you subtract it, A minus B, doesn't really matter. Ultimately, what you're going to do with this is put it into the alpha channel. So right now I see that all the information, if I hit my RG and B on my keyboard, all of it's in the red channel. So if I take a shuffle node and I take the red channel and put it into the alpha, now that's our alpha channel. And we know from using an alpha channel, I can use a grade now and I can plug that into this. So we can use this alpha to color correct this picture. And what that does is it just allows us to color correct easily the areas that need to be despilled. So that's called a despill matte. You're creating an alpha of the areas that have removed the green essentially from them. So what I'm going to do with this alpha that we've created, I'm going to grade it up a little bit as well. So we see it's kind of gray, but I want to make it a little bit brighter. So I'm going to switch to RGBA or alpha, it doesn't matter, because we're just using the alpha channel. And I'm just going to grade it up a little bit so that this area will be more affected. So the whole point of this is now that we have this alpha constructed here, I can use a grade and plug the mask in, and I can grade up and down. And you see now I can easily control that area that needs to be despilled. And so going on with our example, if this was a red sky that we were putting behind here, and I just wanted red to be contaminated in this side of the hair before we merge the picture over, so we don't get that gray, so we don't get this gray foggy effect. We want to contaminate the image in the background color, or the foreground color, like I said. So for example, let's say we wanted to go with the background approach, I would pull in red and I would really saturate it and maybe brighten it up a little bit. So now you see that this area is being contaminated. We're getting rid of the gray. And also what you could do is you could just isolate it to one specific area. So if I mask it with a roto, and I set this to mask, I can draw that roto shape on the area that needs to be despilled separately. So that's what it looks like. Looks weird, but we have this overall gray despill, which might solve most of our despill problems. But any specific areas that don't line up with our background, we'd do something separate like this. So now if we look at the final image, we see that area is contaminated red. So obviously it's not going to work great on this background as an example, but the other thing we could do, instead of doing the background color, we could do similar to the hair color. So to go actually with a proper example, we could maybe darken this a little bit, and we could pull a little bit of brown into that color. So if I kind of bring a little bit of brown, so I'm bringing the green and the red up, and maybe bring that brightness down a little bit more. Something I might need to do is, you see, if I put all the way to 0, it's not black, which is not doing exactly what I want, and that's because our alpha here is not completely solid. So you see when I sample this despill matte that I created, it's not set to 1. So I need to make that alpha a little bit stronger. All right, so now you can see it's doing a pretty strong effect. Let me just pull this back a little bit. So I can do something like this, and we can just do a quick preview of what that's going to look like. So you see we're starting to eliminate some of the weird areas. This is not a perfect despill, and I'm going to show you guys more advanced ways to get a better despill than this, because we're actually starting to lose a little bit of detail in this way. But that's the concept, is that you want to target areas differently based on the color that is there. So obviously you need to be really careful with this alpha approach, because if you start doing this, you see we start getting like these weird crunchy sort of effects here. So you got to be a little bit careful. And one way to play around with this is play around with that despill matte. So if I play with gamma, that might actually give us a better result as well. So you see that it's kind of fading, it's kind of contaminating into our image when I gamma up. So what I'm doing here is our despill matte, I'm gammaing up. And just so I don't get such a harsh alpha here, because if I do this, we start to get these bizarre shapes in the hair, and that's going to show up in your final image. So you want to keep it kind of a soft blend, and that's kind of what I'm doing. So I'm just playing around with the gamma and the gain. And now you see something like that, and then we can look at the final image, and it starts to look a little bit better. Maybe that's a little bit too dark, so we could go there and adjust it. But you see, essentially we're taking a color that's similar to the background and kind of contaminating it inward. Now, this would be obviously problematic if your background was moving, so moving quickly. That's where we would have to do something called a dynamic despill, where this color here is changing based on the background image. And that's a more advanced technique. We're going to go over it later. But that's just the main concept of keying, is you need to consider your foreground and your background color, what's being put behind, and yeah, so that's how we're going to approach it. There's another technique we can do called luminance blend. So I've kind of put an example here of how to do one of those. And it'll get you like most of the despill potentially. So it's something to consider if you have a background similar to this, where you have very bright and very dark in the same areas. And like I said, we can either expand the foreground color or try to get the background color into our foreground. So For example, this area, the darker areas, I just want to make them a darker D-spill. So that would be one way to approach it. So what you can actually do is create 2 D-spills. You create one with a darker color and one with a brighter color. And I'm going to go through the tools of D-spill madness to show you guys exactly how to create D-spills with different brightness values in the next video. We're going to explain the tools. Just explain the theory right now because there's quite a lot of it. But you see, we create 2 D-spills. And what I can actually do is say, I want the brighter D-spill where the brighter edges are. So I want to say, I want this D-spill on the areas that are bright, like his hair is all lit up by this light here, whereas his hair over here is dark. So I want this color to be here, and I want the other color to be here. So one way you could do that is you could key your image. So I take a really harsh key, and I want to isolate the areas that are dark and bright. So I want to just target the brighter areas, for example. So I'm going to pull this down and then pull this over. So we see now we just are targeting the bright hair, and the dark hair is not in the alpha. And what you can actually do is mask that by your normal key that you did. So our normal alpha key looks like this. You remember this is what we already talked about. So if I take that image and I crunch it a little bit and I mask that against the luminance key, you see now we have the areas that are bright and not the areas that are dark. And I can sharpen that key by using a grade. And I can pull it up and down and just try to get rid of some of that potentially, some of that weird noise that's in there. You know, maybe I need to adjust this thing to try to get rid of it. But now we have this weird looking alpha. And what we could actually do is erode it. So we do it in erode, filter, erode. And we kind of blur it outwards. And then we can just blur it a little bit so we don't have that weird kind of cell pattern looking thing. And now we have this strange looking alpha that's revealing the bright parts of our image and the dark parts are not there. And if we key mix the 2 of these 2 D-spills now, so we have this one, and we key mix it through that alpha that we've created, you see all the areas that are brighter, we have a brighter D-spill, and all the areas that are darker, we're maintaining a darker D-spill. So that's one way you can kind of automate your D-spills if it's a scenario like this, rather than drawing a bunch of rotoshapes for every single brightness level, if you have a lot of things like that. And you can see it's not perfect. You know, this area is getting a little bright, and maybe it's not supposed to be, so we'd have to do something else. But I just want to demonstrate to you guys how we mix D-spills based on the area and the background. And so if we were to plug that result in, it's not going to be perfect, but it'll get us some of the way there. So if we compare, you know, that's the luminance blending, and this is the default D-spill. So it's kind of treating the darker areas a little bit differently. And obviously we would need to still go in and manually fix some things, but it's just one way of, let's say, procedurally trying to despill our image. So these are all kind of, that's kind of an more advanced technique and just something to consider. But now that we know why we're despilling things and how we're despilling things, I'm going to go through and teach you actually these 3 tools so that we know how we can actually do the color corrections easily. And that will allow you to start blending them as necessary once we get into our practical exercise where we build out a full key.